Good afternoon to all of you, or good morning, wherever you are located. We are very excited to welcome you to our webinar about the topic climate risk assessments. My name is Janne Tesch, and I'm a sustainability manager at Leadership and Sustainability. And we at Leadership and Sustainability help our clients to actively reduce their sustainability footprint. We provide end-to-end sustainability strategy services from strategy development and implementation support across environmental and social topics to supply chain management solutions. And with a global team of over 70 experts, we offer verification, training, and advisory services to ensure practical and measurable results. Our holistic approach means that we not only define strategies, but also support our clients in implementing them, monitoring the progress, and creating lasting impact. And whether it's corporate sustainability, ESG compliance, or supply chain optimization, we as LNS help to integrate sustainable practices into your core business. And with me today, I have Karen. Karen, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Thanks, Jana. Welcome, everyone. My name is Karin Ekberg, and I'm the founder and CEO of Leadership and Sustainability. And I'm happy to see all of you on this webinar. Over to you again, Jana.
Thanks, Karen. Yes. And before starting with the actual content of the webinar, just some basics about the Zoom webinar platform. So you are all muted during the webinar, and please feel free to send us any questions during the presentation via the question function. So on the right-hand side on the slide, you can see a screenshot of the webinar window. And as you can see, you can open the Q&A window in the bar at the bottom, and here you can then type your question. And we will reply to all of your questions at the end of our session. And after today's session, we will also provide you with a link to download the presentation and to review a recording. Now, let us briefly review the webinar structure for today. We will review why climate risks are critical. Then we will give you an overview of the most common climate risks and opportunities, and we'll discuss how these are typically clustered. We will then move forward with talking about the steps in conducting a climate risk assessment. And following that, we will discuss some practical examples how identified climate risk assessment results can be acknowledged. And we will close today's webinar with a Q&A session. Let us jump in and discuss why climate risk assessments are critical for your business. The frequency and severity of extreme weather events is increasing, as we all can see, while rising global temperatures lead to long-term climate shifts, and those climate shifts lead to physical risks affecting assets, operations, and supply chains. And there are also transition risks driven by policy, technology, and market changes. Thus, climate risk is now a financial and strategic business issue due to growing impact of climate risks. Some of the most challenging financial and strategic business implications are direct damage to infrastructure, facilities, and critical assets, business interruption, supply chain disruptions, increased insurance costs and reduced insurability, climate risk influencing long-term competitiveness, leading to the need of resilient operations and adaptive business models. Also, the regulatory pressure and stakeholder expectations demand for climate risk assessments. There are expanding mandatory climate disclosure requirements, and alignment with frameworks such as Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD, is needed for some companies. There are several EU regulatory drivers, including the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the CSRD, and all in all, one can say that ESG performance starts influencing access to financing, especially that. And to summarize, climate risk assessment becomes essential to identify, quantify, and prioritize climate-related risks. Because as we all know, there are a lot of climate-related risks and we need to understand them, but also prioritize our actions because we cannot do everything at once. Climate risk assessment becomes also essential to support data-driven strategic decision-making, strengthen resilience and adaptation planning, and to improve transparency, reporting quality, and credibility. In order to build up your climate assessment in a systematic way, let us review an overview of climate risks and opportunities. And we recommend to align your assessment with the structure of the TCFD, as this is a really robust framework. And in the countries where there is a requirement to report on a climate risk assessment, it is normally aligned with the TCFD requirements. That's why we, in our method, also structure the climate assessment according to the TCFD. And I will now go over the risks and opportunities also aligned with the TCFD framework. The TCFD defines several risk and opportunity categories, and I will start with explaining the transitional risks, covering policy and legal risks, imposing a risk through any regulations and policies introduced by national or international authorities. I mean, we see that in the changing regulatory landscape that in different countries or in the EU, different laws are imposed, and this policy and legal shift can lead to transitional risks also impacted through climate. Technology risks are also important to consider, as climate change puts a lot of pressure on innovation and change of existing technologies, or you have technologies and locked in with those technologies. Market risks cover, for example, uncertain market signals, as we again see that we have regulations coming up on the time frame, and then in the end they are paused again, and that's uncertainty in market signals. And a really important point is increased cost of raw materials, because we are all volatile to those price changes, and these are also affected by climate risks. And another risk category, transitional risk category, arising due to climate change is reputation, as shifts in market demand can influence a company's image as well. And there are obviously also physical risks, which in the TCFD framework are divided into acute risks as well as chronic physical risks due to, for instance, rising temperatures. And rising temperatures have a lot of different risks for different categories. For example, rising mean temperatures also impact health and safety, or rising sea levels could impact your logistics. So there's like a variety of things that happen due to climate risks, especially those physical risks. But not only risks should be considered when conducting a climate assessment, because there exists also a variety of opportunities, resulting through resource efficiency, for example, or due to energy source switch, which helps to use lower emission sources of energy and also increases the independency through decentralized renewable energy generation, for example. Other opportunities cover products and services, as climate adaptation and mitigation needs can lead to the need of new products which your company might be developing. Also, opportunities can arise through access to new markets. And one really important aspect is resilience, a business value that is extremely important, especially nowadays with all those geopolitical challenges and uncertainties. All in all, climate risks are a catalyst for business transformation, and early risk identification enables strategic advantage. Resilience investments can reduce losses and unlock value. Climate adaptation and mitigation are also growth drivers, and in the end, a proactive climate strategy enhances long-term enterprise value. And in order to be able to prepare a proactive climate strategy, the very first basic step is this climate assessment to identify gaps, priorities, and to have like a good idea how you can build up this strategy. And with that, I would like to hand over to you, Karin.
Thank you so much, Janne. Now we walk through some of the detailed steps in conducting a climate risk assessment. So let's go there. While conducting a climate assessment, one should focus not on general risks, but the risks related to your own company operations. And that is really important. You need to tailor your assessment to your own company or group or facility. And at Leadership and Sustainability, we have developed a method that we also use for double materiality assessments, where we analyze business function by business function. For climate assessments, we do that as well. And of course, that method has been aligned with climate topics and requirements, such as the TCFD that Janne was mentioning as well. And we suggest working along the following steps. So step 1 would be to define the value chain segments to be assessed, which means your different business functions that you have according to your own business structure. Then to define the climate scenarios, and I will be talking a bit more about that later. And then you need to define your rating criteria. How are you going to rate your risks and opportunities, the financial impact scale, etc. And the next one is to assess the risks and opportunities and related financial impacts, including also the time dimension. And you will see more about that on one of the later slides. And then we always do like a two-step assessment where we first conduct the assessment without any measures that you might be taking internally or with your own programs in order to see, so to say, the raw assessment results. But then we take into account what your company is doing in terms of climate. And that is why we are suggesting this step: review your company's existing climate measures and derive your status quo. And with that combination, you can then have your own status quo, what you are doing today, you have your raw results, and you have your net results. And so with that, you can see also if the measures that you are taking today, if they have an effect. And the next step would be to have your results per climate scenario, and you should then have them excluding status and including status. So that was what I was talking about, raw and net, or gross and net, whatever you call these different results. And then in the last step, you have a hotspot review and a gap identification. And from there, you can then develop your action plan, which would ideally be your next project after you have conducted your climate assessment. So now, what should be assessed? So which elements should be included in your assessment? Well, you have risks and their related financial impacts. You have opportunities and also their related financial impacts. You have your company's status in relation to all the topics that are assessed. And you remember the topics that Janne was showing from the TCFD, the different risks and opportunities. And then you should also include a few different time horizons, suggesting, for example, 3 different time horizons. And they should be aligned with any climate protocol that you are working towards, and perhaps also with your company's financial planning, if that is possible. And then you should also have 2 climate scenarios. And climate scenarios, what does that mean? Well, this means 2 different temperature scenarios. So let's say we are actually succeeding in keeping the 1.5 degree temperature increase. That could be one scenario, and another one would probably be that we are exceeding that temperature, perhaps with 3 degrees, or perhaps even higher. But in any case, you should really have 2 different scenarios so that you can really test your own situation and your plans. And on this slide now, you can see a small extract. This is one example of how we would be working and what it looks like like if you really zoom into the assessment. So you can see here the different climate-related risks. And as Janne mentioned, the ones that are listed here, those are the transition risks. And of course, that list would then be continued to the physical risks and also to the opportunities. And then with the columns here, you see status, you see also risk, opportunity, and the financial impact. And this is also a bit of a summary because we work at a more detailed level and then we pull up the results into a more easy to read than table. And so we have inserted some of the risks, as I said, and the higher the number, the more significant the risk. So, and also more significant the opportunity. So a high number for opportunity would mean a good opportunity, and on the other hand, a high number for the risk. In this case here on this representation, you see only the summary of opportunity and risk. And and this screenshot also comes from one selected climate scenario. So you can see this is the scenario that we called number 1. And then it would continue like this, so building it out for both scenarios and of course for all risks and opportunities. So perhaps now you can have a small picture of what it could look like if you would be applying our methodology. There is no published standard on how to conduct this. So everyone needs to develop his or her own methodology on how to do it and apply, of course, the TCFD and any other frameworks that you're working against. And so this was how we did it. And what you can see also on this slide is here that we also have indicated now short-term, medium-term, and long-term with 3 different time horizons. So that is how it would build out if you develop such a methodology and apply it. And now I would like to move over and speak a bit about some practical examples on how to handle climate risk assessment and how to deal with problems you might have. So you would need to identify your gaps and build your climate action plan. And there are some practical implications and opportunities that you might have that we can have a look at here. So for example, some of the risks that you might have are flooding and extreme heat in production regions. And one of the measures or some of the measures that you could take instead of full relocation, which is sometimes really very, very difficult to do and probably also very costly and might have a significant impact on your supply chain if the production is taking place in your supply chain, or of course within your own company if you have internally manufacturing within your own company. So you could instead prioritize to work on practical resilience upgrades at the existing sites, and especially, of course, in high-risk regions. So you could, for example, elevate critical equipment and electrical systems. You could install flood barriers, improved drainage and backup pumps, and you could relocate high-value inventory above ground level. And for extreme heat, you could apply reflective roof coatings and improve insulation, install cost-efficient cooling systems, for example, evaporative cooling, and to introduce worker heat protection measures and temperature monitoring. We know that the heat, the extreme heat regions, and the situation in the factories, especially on the shop floor, may be severely impacted if you have heat waves in your regions, and obviously the workers will be very much impacted by that. So to have some protection measures, temperature monitoring, additional drinking stations, and also, for example, just additional breaks, more frequent breaks, for example, even perhaps adjusting the working hours. So there are lots of things you can practically do on site instead of just relocate. And then we have raw material availability. You can invest in resilient sources of cotton, wool, or synthetic fibers. Consider drought-tolerant crops or recycled fibers. We have on the inventory and logistics side, You can store critical materials in multiple warehouses, use climate-resilient transportation routes to prevent supply disruptions. And finally, on this slide, we have also energy and water stress. You can retrofit factories with water-efficient dyeing processes and backup power systems to withstand heat waves or water shortages. And obviously, some of these measures here would also influence and have an effect on your decarbonization plans. So it really goes hand in hand that some of the measures here, can help you also on the road towards decarbonization. And when we come to the transitional risks, we have, for example, we have carbon pricing and regulations, switching to low carbon materials and processes to meet future emissions regulations. We have, for example, and this is not a future regulation, the EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, where you are paying as an importing brand or manufacturer, you are paying a fee for the embedded carbon that you have in your products or materials that you are importing. The consumer demand shift, so launch more sustainable product lines and recycling programs to meet ESG conscious consumers. And I truly hope that consumers will become more and more aware and begin also to put more emphasis on a more sustainable consumption and production. Just a second, please. And then we have also investor pressure. So if you are aligning with the TCFD recommendation, disclose climate risks in financial reports to attract sustainable investors. And then for chemical product and waste regulations, move to less toxic dyes, reduce microplastics in synthetic fibers, and adopt circular economy strategies. And we were just talking about substitution of hazardous chemicals the other day. And this is something that we often see when we visit factories, that there are not so many substitution programs running that we can see visibly. And I think this would be a really, really important step, not only to work with RSLs and MRSLs, but actually begin working on trying to understand which chemicals do I need to substitute. And here, of course, you can also influence your situation regarding climate risks if you do that. And for supplier engagement, you can train suppliers on energy efficiency, water use, and sustainable practices. And these are more strategic and operational measures. Product innovation, develop apparel with recycled fibers, biodegradable fibers, fabrics or low water manufactured fabrics and products, KPIs and reporting, setting targets like percentage of sustainable materials, number of supply audits, or greenhouse gas reduction per garment. And I'm totally aware that many of you are already doing this, but it is important to emphasize those goals as well as a contribution to reducing your climate risks and seizing your opportunities as well. And then, so your climate assessment journey starts now. Understand, begins with that, know where you stand, and then begin turning your insights into impactful actions and transform, make your organization resilient and more sustainable. And in our experience, this type of assessment is like a learning journey. You learn a lot about your own business, about your different business function. It is also when you engage with your different business functions, like sourcing, for example, product development, etc. This is an opportunity for you to spread your sustainability programs into your different business functions. And I think we all agree that the more you can do that, the better your sustainability programs will be running as well. The more support you have from your entire business, the better you will be able to drive your sustainability strategies and programs. And we have time for questions, but I have one slide first where I want to just show you what our portfolio is in terms of strategy services. So we conduct materiality assessments, of course, the double materiality assessment according to the CSRD. We also support brands and retailers and manufacturer groups with strategy development and implementation support. So implementation support can be any project where you need support for your strategy implementation. It can be a CBAM calculation, it can be a packaging calculation, it can be a greenhouse gas footprinting, it can be developing a supply chain management procedure, etc. And then, of course, communication. So we support with reporting and have supported several brands already with their sustainability reports. And we can also be available for you at any time when you need support, so ongoing support as well. Climate, corporate carbon footprinting, SBT, science-based target support, strategy and mitigation plans. We also have an e-learning platform that we are using for trainings, so we can support you with e-learnings and have your team members or your supplier representatives learning on our e-learning platform. And finally, we also offer verification and assurance services. So within the HIG Index, the BRM verification, and of course on the supply chain side, we also conduct HIG FEM and SLCP verifications, FDM, the Facility Data Manager verification. But here, coming back to the strategy services, greenhouse gas verifications, and also report assurance. So that was just one brief slide about our services. Please feel free to reach out to me or to our info address as well if you have a question or if you are interested in working with us or exploring working with us. Of course, any first conversation proposals, we always do them for free. It doesn't cost you, and you can still decide how you would like to go about it. It's an opportunity to get to know us a bit better. And I want to thank you so much for joining. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and I wish you a nice afternoon and evening or morning, wherever you are.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.